Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today we will be discussing some of the major changes in the media industry during the pandemic. The major change that we will focus on today is the massive move of movies that are starting to be released on streaming platforms rather than released in theaters. As theaters were shut down, it was the perfect opportunity for studios to move the films that were supposed to be released in theaters to their own streaming services. Many of these studios were already trying to compete with Netflix's historic growth even before the pandemic, and this was a perfect opportunity for them. Netflix is pretty well known for producing many movies and releasing them exclusively on their own platform. Some might say they're even notorious for all the terrible TV shows and movies they release. This is because Netflix has greenlit many smaller productions that really don't cost them very much at all. But every once in a while, something large is produced from this. A perfect example would be Squid Game. Everybody at the moment knows about Squid Game, and it is massive, even though the production was only about $24 million, which is rather cheap for normal TV shows and wasn't really that much of a cost for the company. But that doesn't mean that the effect across the industry hasn't been noticed. It has had a wide effect on the amount of foreign products being made, and it is a good example of the recent globalization that Netflix is trying to take advantage of. This increase in small-time movies released directly to streaming platforms is what many other companies are trying to replicate. But this move to streaming platforms isn't really sitting well with some of the bigger earners in the industry, some of which are the major stars that earn a cut from these movies' box office revenue. And they've been very critical about this change. One of the big events we covered this year was Scarlett Johansson suing Disney for releasing Black Widow on Disney+. Christopher Nolan has also been in the news recently for acquitting Warner Brothers because they were planning to release films on their streaming services.
There's such controversy around it because they didn't tell anyone. In 2021, they've got some of the top filmmakers in the world. They've got some of the biggest stars in the world who have worked for years, in some cases, on these projects very close to their hearts that are meant to be, big screen experiences. They're meant to be out there for the widest possible audiences, the sort of A release. And now they're being used as a loss leader for the streaming service, for the fledgling streaming service, without any consultation or any. So, there's a lot of controversy. It's very, 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 very messy. A real bait and switch.
All in all, studios still seem to be pushing this change without much regard to the criticism. And the real shocker might be that most filmmakers don't mind or even actually like the change to the theatrical release. Stephen Follows conducted a survey which showed that out of 363 people working in the industry, many of these people wanted a decrease or even elimination of theatrical windows. And this is one of the major events that has happened during this pandemic, where we saw the theatrical window, which used to be commonly 90 days, lowered to 45 days. This change will affect when common audiences will be able to see movies from their own homes, and it should change the way people feel about attending the theaters. A decrease of 90 days to 45 will likely make many who might have seen these movies in theaters wait until they're released on streaming platforms or on video. Of course, another big change is the actual theaters themselves. These theaters have been shut down for most of the pandemic, and some of them have been really suffering, especially the small-time theaters, which really didn't have the money or support to go on for this long without making anything. So most of these smaller theaters have been shut down, and even the big theaters are hurting. This change from the 90-day to 45-day theatrical window will probably hurt them a lot as well. This may lead to a major change in how theaters are run. In recent news, Netflix has also been trying to buy theaters and expand their influence into other realms of the industry. This major monopolization has been greatly criticized by people, and it is worrying for the future of theaters that aren't tied to studios. I myself enjoy going to theaters, and I enjoy the experience of watching a movie on the big screen, but I normally don't go see movies in theaters. This is probably because of the vast majority of movies on Netflix, which aren't in theaters. I often enjoy watching older films, and I find most of the new serializations somewhat boring. So to me, the pandemic hasn't really affected my movie-going experiences very much. That being said, theaters do seem to be the ones that have been most harmed by the pandemic in the industry. And though I will still likely go to theaters every once in a while, I most likely won't be going anywhere near as much as I would before. And I thank you for coming to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, and please check out more if you're interested.